3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files. Last time, we walked through how elite universities knowingly accepted millions from a convicted sex offender and tried to hide the paper trail. Today, we're following that money to the billionaires who wrote the checks: Bill Gates, Reid Hoffman, and the Silicon Valley network that kept Epstein in their orbit. As always, every document and source we reference is available at epsteinfiles.fm. So in September 2013, Bill Gates walks into Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan townhouse for what became the first of dozens of documented meetings. And by October 2014, Gates was flying on Epstein's private plane from Teterboro to Palm Beach. All of this 5 to 6 years after Epstein's 2008 conviction was public record. Melinda Gates met Epstein once in 2011, called him evil personified, said she had nightmares. The Bill's meetings with Epstein continued for 3 more years.
And that timeline right there is the entire framework for today. It's the most critical piece of evidence.
It is, because so often in these discussions, there's this tendency to blur the chronology.
To suggest these were old relationships, legacy connections from before anyone knew.
Exactly. But the documents we have, especially around the Silicon Valley cohort Gates, Hoffman, the funding of the MIT Media Lab, they show the opposite.
These were not legacy relationships. These were initiated, or at least significantly deepened, after Jeffrey Epstein was a registered level 3 sex offender.
You have to be absolutely forensic about the dates.
You do, because the dates just dismantle the entire defense of ignorance. It's not plausible.
So let's be precise. We need to start with Bill Gates. According to the investigation by the New York Times, the one titled, "Bill Gates Met with Jeffrey Epstein Many Times," this relationship really gets going in 2011.
3 years after the conviction in Florida. 3 years.
And the public story for a long time was, these were just casual encounters. Maybe at a conference, a chance meeting.
But the flight logs, the calendar entries, they directly contradict that narrative. We are talking about dozens of documented meetings.
Dozens.
That volume of contact is completely inconsistent with a casual acquaintance. You don't meet with someone dozens of times, visit their home, fly on their plane for casual reasons.
Not at that level. In the world of high net worth individuals, time is the single scarcest asset.
Right. So allocating dozens of hours to one person signals a very high priority.
And there's a piece of evidence from 2011 that gives us some insight into the mindset here. It's an email that Gates himself wrote to his colleagues after meeting Epstein.
And he says, quote, "His lifestyle is very different and kind of intriguing, although it would not work for me."
Intriguing is such a specific and detached choice of words given who he's meeting.
It's forensic gold. It really is. It implies this fascination. It suggests that despite the criminal record, which was public knowledge, New York Magazine had profiled him, the 2008 conviction was global news. Gates found the network Epstein built to be valuable.
It wasn't about the money. Gates has his own capital, obviously.
Of course. It was about the access, the network. The Times reporting shows they discussed philanthropy, the Gates Foundation. This tells you Gates saw Epstein as a legitimate gateway to other pools of capital or influence.
That word intriguing, it suggests he was looking at Epstein's operation less as a crime scene and more as a unique business model.
That's a good way to put it. And that gateway, it worked both ways.
Right. Let's pause on the mechanics of that gateway. Because usually you think of philanthropy as a straight line. A donor gives to an institution, period.
Simple.
But the documents show Epstein inserting himself directly into that line. Which brings us to the money, specifically the MIT Media Lab donation.
This is where everything blurs. The lines between Gates, Epstein, and the university administration, they just dissolve.
So October 2014, the Media Lab gets a $2 million donation. On paper, it's from the Gates Foundation. Looks like a standard, clean gift.
But the internal documents, they tell a completely different story. And this is one of the most revealing email chains in the entire MIT investigation.
We're looking at the MIT Goodwin Proctor report here and also Ronan Farrow's work in The New Yorker.
And the email from Joy Ito, the director of the Media Lab, it states it explicitly. It says, "This is a $2 MEV gift from Bill Gates, directed by Jeffrey Epstein."
Directed by. That phrasing, it just removes any ambiguity about who was brokering the deal.
Precisely. In any normal context, the Gates Foundation is massive. They have program officers, grant writers, a huge staff.
They do not need a middleman to give money to MIT.
They absolutely do not. The fact that this gift was directed by Jeffrey means Epstein was given the agency to allocate Gates's resources. It empowered him. It sent a message to Joy Ito that said, "I hold the keys to Bill Gates."
And the response from the university's administration is, if anything, even more damning about the cover-up.
Oh, it is.
Peter Cohen, who is the director of development for the Media Lab, he replies to Ito's email, and he writes, quote, "For gift recording purposes, we will not be mentioning Jeffrey's name as the gift source," unquote.
They were scrubbing the record. Right there, in writing. This is where you see administrative complicity become active concealment.
It's like they were laundering the influence?
It's a classic money laundering technique, but applied to reputation. You see, Epstein couldn't donate easily in his own name. He was flagged as a disqualified donor in MIT's own database.
Marked as someone to avoid because of his sex offender status.
Exactly. So he uses his connection to Gates. Gates provides the clean money. Epstein gets the credit internally for making it happen. The lab gets the cash and the public record. It only shows the respectable name, Bill Gates.
It's a mechanism designed from the ground up to bypass compliance.
It is. So Gates, whether he intended to or not, functioned as a reputation shield for Epstein at MIT.
And the Goodwin-Procter report shows this wasn't just a one-off idea.
No, there was a discussion about Leon Black, the founder of Apollo Global Management, doing something very similar, a $5.5 million donation that was also part of this directed funding ecosystem.
So it suggests Epstein was trading on his ability to unlock billionaire capital to buy his way back into these elite institutions.
He was brokering access to clean money in exchange for institutional legitimacy. That was the trade.
We have to juxtapose all of this business conduct with a personal fallout. Because the defense is always, well, we didn't know how bad he was.
Right, the charming sociopath argument.
But we have testimony from Melinda French Gates that just directly contradicts the idea that his character was in any way ambiguous. In her CBS News interview, she was incredibly stark.
She was. She said she met him one time, exactly once, in 2011. And she did it specifically to see who this man was that her husband was spending time with.
And her reaction was visceral.
She used the words abhorrent and evil personified. She said she had nightmares afterwards.
This establishes that the creepiness, the evil, it wasn't hidden. It wasn't subtle. It was palpable in a single meeting.
It completely undermines the idea that Epstein fooled everyone. Melinda saw it instantly.
And yet, Bill Gates continued the relationship for 3 more years after that meeting in 2011. He took that flight to Palm Beach in 2014.
That gap, that 3-year gap between 2011 and 2014, that is where the real tension is. If your spouse identifies someone as evil personified, and that person is a convicted sex offender, continuing that relationship requires a very calculated decision.
It suggests that the perceived value of the connection, the intrigue, the networking it, outweighed the moral risk, the reputational risk.
And in 2021, Gates himself admitted to the Wall Street Journal it was a huge mistake to spend time with him to give him the credibility of being there.
Credibility. That's the word. That's the currency.
It is the currency of the realm. Epstein had money, but after 2008, he had zero credibility. He had to borrow it.
And standing next to Bill Gates or flying with him, it transfers that credibility right back to Epstein.
It normalizes him. It signals to everyone else in that orbit that he's safe, that he's been vetted.
Let's move deeper into the institution that was facilitating this normalization. We touched on the MIT Media Lab, but the culture there.
Yeah.
It deserves a much closer look.
It does. The New Yorker, exposed by Ronan Farrow, described a culture where staff referred to Epstein by a code name.
Voldemort, the one who must not be named.
That code name tells you everything. It indicates a conscious awareness of guilt. You don't use code names for legitimate donors. You use them when you know you're doing something that cannot survive sunlight.
The staff knew. The MIT Goodwin-Procter report confirms that Epstein was flagged in their own donor database. He was officially disqualified.
So they took the money anyway. And the question is how? How does a university bypass its own disqualified list?
They just created a workaround. The leadership, specifically Joy Ito and Peter Cohen, they constructed this framework where they could accept the capital as long as it was anonymous.
But as the whistleblower, Sian Swenson, pointed out, this wasn't standard anonymity. Usually a donor requests anonymity for privacy.
Here, the institution was enforcing anonymity to protect itself from the donor.
Swenson's testimony is just devastating. She was a development associate. She was in the room. She detailed conversations where Ito and Cohen explicitly discussed how to take the money without tripping the internal alarms.
She remembers Cohen saying, "Jeffrey money needs to be anonymous."
And this wasn't just a few checks. The report details $525,000 given directly to the lab by Epstein himself.
But the directed donations, the money from Gates, from Leon Black, that Epstein corralled, that totaled around $7.5 million.
And we have to note the personal financial entanglement here. Joy Ito didn't just take money for the lab. He accepted $1.2 million personally for his own investment funds from Epstein.
That personal financial thread, it makes it very difficult to argue this was all just for the greater good of the university.
It's a direct conflict of interest. It suggests the decision to accept Epstein's money wasn't just about keeping the lights on at the lab. It was also about personal enrichment for the director.
And the timeline for accountability is also very telling. Joy Ito resigned on September 7th, 2019.
Which was exactly 1 day after Ronan Farrow's New Yorker article was published.
Meaning the internal ethics didn't trigger the resignation?
No.
The public exposure did.
Exactly. The behavior had continued for years. The resignation only happened when the secrecy failed.
And it's crucial to point out, based on that MIT Goodwin Proctor report, Ito was not a lone actor. This wasn't a rogue operation.
Not at all. The report names senior leadership, Vice President R. Gregory Morgan, Jeffrey Newton, Israel Ruiz.
These are high-level administrators.
The highest. The report shows they discussed Epstein's sex offender status back in 2013. They knew, and yet they approved this informal framework where Epstein could donate as long as it was low profile.
They made a risk assessment.
They did. They weighed the funding against the safety of the campus environment. And you have to remember, Epstein was visiting the campus, he was meeting with researchers, and they chose the funding.
They prioritized the check over the safety of their own students and staff.
That is the forensic conclusion you have to draw from the documents.
This pattern, this prioritization, it wasn't unique to MIT. We see a very similar dynamic playing out in the venture capital world.
That's right.
Let's talk about Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn. In 2015, that's 7 years post-conviction, Hoffman flew on Epstein's plane to the MIT Media Lab for its 50th anniversary event.
The date is so significant, 2015. This is well into the period where Epstein's continued predatory behavior was being whispered about, if not yet fully documented again by the press. The conviction was practically ancient history by then.
And Hoffman's apology, which he later released to Axios, it contains what you could call a smoking gun regarding the motive of this entire class of enablers.
It really does. Hoffman said, quote, "By agreeing to participate in any fundraising activity where Epstein was present, I helped to repair his reputation and perpetuate injustice."
Repair his reputation.
Yeah.
He admits that was the goal.
It's a direct admission of the transactional nature of the relationship. Billionaires like Hoffman and Gates, they didn't need Epstein's money. What they provided in exchange for access to his network or his intrigue was reputation laundering.
They were active participants in a rehabilitation project for a convicted sex offender.
And that project normalized his presence throughout Silicon Valley. We have documentation from Business Insider and other sources. There's a photograph of Elon Musk with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell at the Vanity Fair Oscar party in 2014.
And Mark Zuckerberg attended a dinner at Epstein's Manhattan townhouse in 2011.
Right, and we have to be very careful here. Unlike with Gates or the Media Lab, the documents we have do not show direct funding from Musk or Zuckerberg to Epstein or from Epstein to them.
But the physical proximity is the evidence.
It is. By attending these dinners, these parties, they signal to the rest of the industry that Epstein is safe. If the founder of Facebook and the founder of Tesla are in the room, then the junior VC or the academic researcher, they assume due diligence has already been done.
It creates a permission structure.
Precisely. It's a cascade of validation. It creates a reality where a felony conviction is treated like a minor footnote, not a disqualifier.
We've covered MIT and the West Coast. You need to go back to Cambridge, but to Harvard this time.
Right. The Harvard Office of General Counsel report tries to draw a distinction between their funding and MIT's. Harvard points out that most of the $9.1 million they got from Epstein came between 1998 and 2008. So, before the conviction.
That's technically true regarding the wire transfers. The flow of money did largely stop after 2008, but the currency changed. It shifted from dollars to access.
And that's what the report documents. After his conviction, Epstein visited Harvard's campus more than 40 times between 2010 and 2018.
40 times.
And he wasn't just, walking around Harvard Yard. He had an office.
He had a personal keycard and a numerical passcode to the Program for Evolutionary Dynamics, the PED. This was the program run by Martin Nowak, which Epstein had funded to the tune of $6.5 million.
They called office 610 at 1 Brattle Square Jeffrey's office.
So a convicted, registered sex offender had unescorted 247 access to a Harvard University building for a decade after his conviction. It's staggering. A building filled with students and researchers. The Harvard report does note he didn't formally engage with undergraduates, but he used the office to network. He brought people there. It was his academic clubhouse.
It's a massive institutional failure. The university stopped taking his checks, likely to protect their public relations, but they gave him the keys to the building, which endangered their people.
And this brings us to Lawrence Summers, former Treasury Secretary, former president of Harvard. The Harvard Crimson released an analysis of emails between Summers and Epstein that continued right up until July 2019.
That date is just chilling. July 2019. That's literally days before Epstein's final arrest. Summers was in contact with him until the absolute end.
And the content of those emails, it wasn't just polite correspondence.
Not at all. Summers was seeking personal advice from Epstein. The emails show a familiarity that just rebuts any defense that this was some legacy acquaintance he was stuck with.
He referred to a woman as Epstein's wingman and another as a mentee.
Wingman. In the context of Jeffrey Epstein, that is an incredibly loaded term. It's difficult to interpret that innocuously.
It suggests Summers understood the dynamics of Epstein's entourage.
It does. And for one of the most powerful economists in the world to maintain that kind of active, familiar relationship with a known predator, it implies Summers completely divorced the man's utility from his morality.
This theme, utility versus morality, it's actually explicitly stated in the defense offered by Nicholas Negroponte,
The co-founder of the MIT Media Lab, a legend in tech.
Right. After the scandal broke in September 2019, there was an all-hands meeting at the lab, a crisis meeting.
And this meeting was documented in the New Yorker and the evidence summaries. Negroponte stood up in front of the horrified staff, and he defended the decision to take the money.
He said, quote, "If you wind back the clock, I would still say take it."
Even with hindsight, I would still say take it.
He argued that the money was necessary for the lab's survival. He was making a purely utilitarian calculation.
The cash value of the research, in his view, exceeded the moral cost of the source. He viewed the money as an abstraction.
But the staff did not view it as an abstraction.
No. The reaction from the staff was immediate. Kate Darling, a researcher at the lab, she shouted from the audience, "Shut up! We've been cleaning up your messes for 8 years."
And that moment just encapsulates the entire conflict, doesn't it?
It does. You have the leadership Negroponte, Ito, who see the money as fuel for the machine. And you have the staff, Darling, Swenson, Ethan Zuckerman, who see the presence of a predator as an immediate physical and moral threat.
Ethan Zuckerman, who is the director of the Center for Civic Media at the lab, he resigned over this.
His statement was powerful. He said the lab had violated its own values so clearly. It just highlights this huge divide. The people at the top thought they could manage the reputational risk. The people on the ground realized the risk wasn't to reputation, it was to integrity and to safety.
So the question is how? How did so many smart people, Gates, Hoffman, the heads of MIT and Harvard, how did they all collectively fail to stop this?
The documents point to a mechanism of circular validation.
The reputation shield.
Exactly. It's a failure of circular logic. MIT assumed Epstein was safe to deal with because, well, Bill Gates was associating with him.
And Bill Gates assumed Epstein was interesting and credible because he had an office at Harvard and connections to legitimate scientists.
And Reid Hoffman assumed Epstein was, quote, redeemable because an institution like MIT was still accepting his donations.
It's a house of cards.
It's a complete house of cards. Due diligence was outsourced to the network. No single person, no single institution performed a genuine independent risk assessment because they all relied on the implied endorsement of the others.
They just looked around the room, saw other powerful people, and assumed, well, someone else must have vetted him.
And when they did vet him, like when the MIT database flagged him as disqualified, they just ignored their own systems.
The disqualified paradox.
Yes. The administrative safeguards actually worked. The database flashed a red light. The staff warned Ito. But the leadership viewed those safeguards as obstacles to be overcome, not as protections to be heeded.
They used anonymity not to protect a donor's privacy, but to bypass their own compliance.
The policies existed, but they were intentionally circumvented by leadership to get access to the capital.
So if we synthesize all of this, we have a clear timeline contradiction. The conviction was 2008. The deep integration with Gates, MIT, Hoffman, it all happens between 2011 and 2018.
The "we didn't know" defense is just factually impossible. The New York Magazine article from 2002 was public record. The conviction was public record. The sex offender registry is public record.
And the documents show a calculated exchange.
A trade. Money for access, access for reputation.
And it was a trade made by men who, frankly, had everything. Which brings us to the lingering unanswered question in all of these files.
Why? We know how they did it. The anonymous donations, the key cards, the directed gifts. We know who did it. Gates, Ito, Nowak, Summers. But the documents don't fully explain why. Why did individuals with essentially unlimited resources feel they needed this specific money from this specific source?
Why risk a legacy like the Gates Foundation for a relationship with a known sex offender?
The documents show us the mechanics of the enabling. But the psychological motive, that apparent desperation for that specific network, that remains the darkest part of this puzzle.
It circles back to what we mentioned earlier about the environment. I want to touch on one detail regarding the Gates meeting in 2013 that really underscores the willful nature of this. The New York Times reported that Gates' staff had visited Epstein's mansion prior to Gates himself going.
Right, so you have a staff-level vetting, theoretically, and then you have the principal, Gates, going in. And in that 2011 email you mentioned, Gates refers to the lifestyle as intriguing. We have to look at the environment Epstein created. This wasn't a sterile conference room. This was a townhouse where, as we know from other sources and later trials, the environment was designed to entrap and compromise. For Gates to find that intriguing suggests a suspension of judgment that goes beyond just bad business sense.
And it connects to Melinda's reaction. If she saw evil personified in one meeting, what did Bill see in dozens? The discrepancy in perception between husband and wife there is vast.
It suggests a fundamental difference in what they were looking for. Melinda was looking at the man. Bill, perhaps, was looking at the utility. And this brings us back to the MIT directed gift, that $2 million from Gates. We need to be crystal clear on the mechanics described in the Goodwin-Procter report. Gates writes the check, but Epstein gets a credit. Why would Gates allow that?
That's the key. Why let a middleman take credit for your philanthropy?
Unless the goal was to empower the middleman. By allowing Epstein to direct that gift, Gates gave Epstein leverage over Joy Ito. It made Epstein the rainmaker. It gave Epstein power over the lab. Gates essentially handed Epstein a loaded gun of influence to hold to the head of the media lab. I brought you Gates, I can bring you others.
And he did, or tried to. The email regarding Leon Black, $5.5 million. Epstein was trying to replicate that Gates mechanism.
If Jeffrey tells you that Leon would like a little love from MIT, we can arrange that too. That's the quote from the emails. It shows Epstein was orchestrating a flow of billionaire capital to wash his own reputation. And the billionaires were compliant participants in this orchestration.
Let's touch on the Voldemort culture again. Sian Swenson's interview with Ronan Farrow. She mentioned that when Epstein visited the lab, he brought 2 young women with him.
Assistants.
Right, assistants. And Swenson noted they looked like models, Eastern European. And the staff at the lab were so uncomfortable they debated intervening.
Swenson said, all of us women made it a point to be super nice to them. We literally had a conversation about how, on the off chance that they're not there by choice, we could maybe help them. Think about that. You are at one of the most prestigious research institutions on the planet, and the staff is doing a welfare check on the guests of a donor because the donor is a known predator.
And yet, Ito allowed him to wander the halls.
Ito, and by extension the informal framework of the senior team. The MIT report says the senior team wasn't aware of the specific visits, but they created the conditions for them. They approved the relationship. Once you approve the money, you approve the access. You can't separate them.
And Harvard, the distinction they make, we stop taking the money, feels like a legalistic fig leaf when you look at the keycard access.
It is a distinction without a difference in terms of safety. In fact, one could argue the access is worse. Money is just a wire transfer. A keycard is physical proximity to students. The Harvard report admits Epstein visited Jeffrey's office more than 40 times. He was hosting people there. He was using Harvard real estate as his own.
And posting about it. The report mentions he asked to be featured on the program's website.
And they did it. Martin Nowak approved it. They put a page up extolling Epstein as a science philanthropist. It was only taken down because a sexual assault survivors group contacted the university in 2014.
2014 again. That year keeps coming up.
It was a turning point. The public awareness was growing, but the institutions were digging in. That's why the Gates donation in October 2014 is so critical. It happened after the survivors group complained to Harvard. The information was out there. The institutions weren't ignorant. They were obstinate.
And Reid Hoffman's flight in 2015. This is for the Media Lab's 50th anniversary.
A celebration. Hoffman flies in with Epstein. It validates Epstein as part of the celebration. It says he belongs here. And Hoffman's apology admitting he thought he could repair the reputation, it reveals the hubris. These tech titans solve complex engineering problems. They thought they could solve the problem of Jeffrey Epstein's reputation.
They treated his sex offender status like a bug in the code that could be patched.
Exactly. A PR bug, not a moral failing, not a crime, a reputation management issue. And that is the fundamental disconnect. They viewed it as a variable to be optimized, not a line that couldn't be crossed.
The role of Larry Summers in this optimization is interesting. He's an economist. He deals in incentives.
And in his emails, he's dealing in favors. The Harvard Crimson reporting on the wingman comment Summers was asking Epstein for advice on how to handle the media, how to handle his own reputation. He was looking to Epstein as a strategist.
A strategist who was a registered sex offender.
Which implies Summers respected Epstein's intellect or his machinations enough to overlook the crimes. It validates Epstein's self-image. Epstein wanted to be seen as a science philanthropist and a mind. By asking for his advice, Summers confirmed that self-image.
The Negroponte defense really seals the institutional attitude. Take it.
It's the ultimate utilitarian argument. But it fails because it ignores the externality. The cost isn't paid by the lab. The cost is paid by the victims of Epstein who see him being feted by MIT. The cost is paid by the women in the lab who have to work in an environment where Voldemort is walking around. Negroponte's calculus was flawed because he only counted the dollars, not the human impact.
And the circular validation. It explains the lack of due diligence.
It explains the laziness. It's intellectual laziness. Bill is here, so it's fine. Harvard gave him an office, so it's fine. It's a failure of critical thinking by the people who pride themselves on critical thinking.
The disqualified paradox at MIT really highlights the administrative complicity. The system worked, the database said no,
and the humans said yes. It shows that compliance systems are useless if the leadership culture is corrupt. The whistleblower Swenson didn't just point out a rule, she pointed out a moral fact. He is a pedophile. And the response was, how do we do this anonymously?
Jeffrey Money needs to be anonymous.
That email from Peter Cohen is the epitaph of the Media Lab's integrity in that era. It confirms the conspiracy to conceal. You don't hide something you're proud of.
So we have the timeline. 2011 to 2018, we have the enablers. Gates, Hoffman, Summers, Ido, Negroponte. We have the mechanism, directed donations and anonymity. And we have the motive, reputation laundering for access.
And at the center of it, a void. The unanswered question of why these men who had everything wanted this.
Perhaps the answer is simply that they believed they were above the rules that apply to everyone else.
Immunity. They thought their wealth and their network provided immunity from the consequences of associating with a monster.
But as the resignations and the divorces and the reputation damage show,
they were wrong.
The emails and flight logs prove the meetings happened. The apologies prove they were mistakes. The resignations prove they were fireable offenses. But the system that allowed it, the circular validation and the prioritization of capital over morality, requires a much deeper reckoning than just a few resignations. Next time, the legal reckoning.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name, and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.